All right, so I've gotten the bench in front of me, the standard cluster from our Z31. I've got our Haltech IC7 dash, and I've got a mounting panel that Haltech also sell. They do a couple of versions of this. They do a column mount, they do a couple of different angles. I've just got a flat one here. If this was the digital dash that the later Z31s come with, I'd be a little hesitant about doing this, but this thing is ugly, so we're gonna chop it up. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna pull this apart, find a way to mount this kind of in that factory bezel. This obviously screws into it, and if you've got a Haltech Elite like we do, it comes with all the hardware to plug this straight into your ECU. Couldn't be easier. If you want to get a little bit more information on the IC7, jump on sparesbox.com.au. But for now, I'm going to get into this, and hopefully it doesn't take me too long. So the IC7 is Haltech's latest offering for digital dashboards, and while I'm normally a believer in analog gauges and keeping them just for the simple point of view of ease and ability to read out of the corner of your eye, especially at nighttime or low light situations, the IC7 has that much programmability and customization that it really kind of overcomes all these issues. So this is a first for me, using something like this. All right, so you can probably tell by the mess, I've been neck deep in this, but it's all finished up now. I've gotten the Haltech IC7 mounted into what is left of the Z31's factory dash. You can see there's not a whole lot left of it. I've just cut this hole out so I can get to the plugs easy enough. It's not pretty, I know, but on this side, looks reasonably good, and it's all pretty strong and steady. There's not gonna be any rattles, vibrations, nothing's loose, and there's enough of the plastic at the back left that it's still pretty strong. And I've chosen to put this plug here. This is the plug for the USB connection to your laptop. Put it in an easy to reach place. This is pretty easy to reach. You could put it in the dashboard, under the dashboard, next to the IC7 as we have. Up to you really. We've chosen to go right there, but otherwise this is all ready to go in the car, which I'm pretty excited for, because once this is in, it means I can power it all up and have a bit of a play. So let's stick it in now and see what it looks like when it's on. It's a good thing it's really easy to get under the dash of this, so I can cable tie all that up later. Heavy sarcasm. Put the steering wheel off, make it a bit easier. I'd like to point out I actually removed the factory dash without removing the steering wheel, yet for some reason struggled to put it back in. But I always prefer to put them in factory bezels, just looks nicer. Just seeing your turns on with ignition only. All right, so we've got our dashboard in. I think it looks fantastic. So we'll power it up now. It should come on with the ECU. There we go. Yeah, how good is that? You can adjust the brightness. You can turn your wipers on. It's a nice game. You can change the screen. They have a couple of preset ones. And what we'll show you later is you can actually plug your laptop into this and customize just about every aspect of each of these screens, down to the colors, the information displayed, how it displays the information, and all the secondary sort of inputs you have in front of you. So if you don't want to see boost because your car's NA or something like that, get rid of that. Put something else that's more critical to you there. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy with how all this has panned out. So as mentioned last episode, we wanted to relocate the drain to the other side of the sump. I also had to move some of the wiring on the back of the firewall to give more clearance between it and the crossover pipe. So pulling the engine out made both jobs really easy. You could drill this hole with the sump still on there, I've seen people do that. However, you'll never get rid of all the metal filings, so you really want to be able to pull the sump off, clean it up, drill your hole, and make sure you don't have any sort of leftover shrapnel inside your engine. I'm just using this oil we had here to check the oil level in the sump when it's full, just so I know what height my drain needs to be. You do not want to have that drain lower than your oil level. You can see the amount of metal you'd have inside your sump should I have done this with it still on the car. So we're just dummying up how our oil feed line is going to sit here. I won't actually make the line until it's in the car, just so all obstacles are there, but it's important to consider with things like this that you don't have the oil line, or any line for that matter, under stress. You want it to be a nice relaxed fit because that can lead to leaks and it can lead to fittings undoing themselves depending on the direction of the tension. So always keep this in mind when coming up with your line routing. So for those asking in the comments about what gearbox we're using, it's the standard Z32 manual gearbox. We did have to extend the hole in the floor of the Z31 body by about 1 inch to have the shifter come through. But using the Z31 transmission mount and the actual rubber from the Z32 box, it bolted straight up to factory positions on the Z31 body, so that made it really easy. The clutch hydraulic system in its entirety is all Z31 still. So we've used oval pipe here just to maximise ground clearance as the car is quite close to the ground. We're also using a flex join for obvious reasons. We want to allow the engine to move independent of its exhaust. You'll get vibrations, you'll break things, it'll all just be a bad time. I like to use an angle gauge just to get the angles correct when I'm cutting bends, as it's fairly easy to get wrong. Now the Haltech WB1 wideband single channel obviously comes with its own bung and sensor. It's imperative to install that. You do want to install a little bit downstream from the turbocharger. We've got it at the far end of the dump pipe here. Nice and easy to install, of course. The hardest part is just drilling a big hole. It is stepped, so it does seat nicely, allowing for you to have a nice kind of butt up to weld against. These gaskets, I absolutely hate these gaskets. This style of gasket is basically guaranteeing a leak, and I'll probably change these out for a nice exhaust gasket with a fire ring around the ports, but as this is what we have on hand right now, this is what we're going to use. So with our turbocharger installed permanently, we can now fit up the rest of our exhaust, finally, and then get on to plumbing up its lines for the last time and working on the wastegate. Of course, it's a screamer pipe. It's a race car. This thing isn't going to have registration, so why wouldn't you? The GFB EX44 is their latest and greatest Wastegate, for the size of this thing, it flows amazingly well. It is very compact, and while we do have an awful lot of space around here, I love the quality of GFP stuff, so it was always going to be the solution to this problem. And I know we've mentioned it before, but if you do tighten up AN fittings, use the proper spanners, don't round them, don't scratch them. So while our coolant feed lines don't necessarily go too close to anything particularly hot, I always like to sheath things that go to the turbocharger, just as a little bit of insurance. We actually take these off the heater flanges off the back of the VG30. We've actually used Raceworks Drivetrain adapters to do so. They do a couple of different sizes. The smallest ones to the Dash 8 fittings actually are a really good match for that. It's a nice easy solution to turn those from the normal barb to an AN fitting. So using an olived stainless steel fitting for our oil feed now. Again, using the correct spanners for this job. You do only get one go at doing this, as they are olived and you'll have to replace the olive should you have to go again. So measure twice, cut once, and make sure it's a good relaxed fit in your engine bay. The VG gets a lot of hate for being hard to work on, but tools like these Toledo constant tension clamps make painful jobs relatively easy. Installing our PWR radiator was very easy, as this is actually made for the Z31 itself. All we have to do is mate it up to our VG30 DTT. We're using a Raceworks header tank to be the high point and bleed point of our cooling system. Once again, Raceworks fitting on everything. We're using these Dash 6 lines from the top radiator hose and the top radiator tank as a feed to our header tank, just to ensure that all air gets passed through that header tank and doesn't continue through the system. This system should basically self-bleed. Our Penrite 10/10 coolant is non-glycol based. It's actually the only Motorsport Australia approved coolant that I know of. This is important as it is not as slick on the track should you drop all your coolant as a glycol based product. And we are of course mixing this with demineralized water, as you should. Penrite sell that product alongside the coolant. Now we used some Triton hose clamps that we had lying around that were close to the right size. Unfortunately, as you can see, they didn't quite clamp up properly, so we ended up having to swap these for conventional worm drive clamps and get the next size down in the nicer clamp. Now it's time to bleed the cooling system. Burp it as best we can, of course. Remember kids, don't drink the Kool-Aid. Now the power steering system is the Z32 power steering pump, and we're using the Z31 reservoir in the factory position and Z31 lines as well. It's a really easy solution. Next is the engine oil. Penrite yet again, the 10/10 oil of course. Plenty of people I know in motorsport love this stuff, I love it. Same again for the gearbox and the diff. I don't know why people persevere with those tiny Tom Thumb pumps. What you need is a big sludge pump like this thing here. Makes these jobs really, really easy. The entire hydraulic clutch system on this car is still all Z31 master slave. It all bolts straight up, which is wonderful. It's important to note if you are bleeding from scratch with these, there is actually a bleed nipple on the master. You will have to bleed from that first, or you will not get a pedal. And the standard Z31 thermo fans at the moment as well. We may change these at a later date, however they're a good fit at the moment. Now that it holds water and it holds oil, there's only one thing left for us to do.